listening to the WrestleHavoc Podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We talk all that goes on in the realm of WWE and AEW every week. And now, here's your host, the one that will give you a reality check on pro wrestling, Flamin' Ricky DeReyes. This is the WrestleHavoc Podcast.
What's up, everybody? It is Flamin' Ricky DeReyes right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Of course, with episode 21, we're going to be talking about a lot of things right here on the show, of course, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the frickin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Of course, we got a lot of things to talk about right here on the show. We're going to be talking about Jon Moxley in an interview with Sports Illustrated, talking about his usage of blood in AEW. Of course, All In is going to be taking place next month in London at Wembley Stadium, and the ticket sales are very, very, very positive for AEW. We're going to be talking about the ticket sales for All In. We're also going to be talking about the ratings for AEW Collision. Of course, the rating came out last week for not yesterday's show, but the previous week's show for the third week of Collision, and that rating is not good whatsoever. We're going to be talking about a report that Fightful Select put out about Warner Brothers Discovery and what they would consider a success for AEW Collision. We're also going to be talking about CM Punk. CM Punk is in the news once again, and he was actually pitched to be a part of the Blood and Guts match, of course, in which we have the Blackpool Combat Club taking on the Elite, and that was actually very interesting, and I honestly hope it will happen, but most likely it will not happen, so I'm going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the rumored meeting, and this is the rumored meeting. This is a rumor that Triple H and Nikon and Vince McMahon had about Vince McMahon's, of course, involvement in the creative process of WWE. Kota Ibushi is also planned for AEW. Looks like he's most likely going to be debuting most likely at Blood and Guts. We're going to be talking about that as well. We're going to be talking about some WWE pay-per-view announcements, as well as the rumored SummerSlam 2023 card, Drew McIntyre's contract status, as well as Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor's 2022 main event, being Claudio Castagnoli taking on Mark Briscoe. So we're going to be talking about all that and much more right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the freaking referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Of course, if you guys had missed it, the AEW Collision review is up on the channel. Of course, I talk about CM Punk and Samoa Joe battling it out in the semifinals of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. CM Punk escapes and beats, for the first time in his career, Samoa Joe, and it looks like the program with CM Punk and Samoa Joe is going to be continuing after what happened after the match, after Joe put CM Punk to sleep. So very interesting developments. I'm definitely interested. The review is doing very well in viewership. So if you guys haven't checked out the AEW Collision review, the link will be in the description below, as well as the SmackDown review. Of course, SmackDown was the fallout of the Bloodline Civil War, in which we talk about the tribal court of Roman Reigns, ending with Jey Uso challenging Roman Reigns to a one-on-one match at SummerSlam, in which, it wasn't officially announced, but we all know it's going to be happening at SummerSlam. So I talk about that and much more on the SmackDown review. Really, SmackDown was the Bloodline show, and of course, SmackDown emanated from Madison Square Garden, so we talk about that and much more on the SmackDown review. The link will also be in the description below. All right, without any further ado, let's go on to episode 21 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. In our first topic, we are going to be talking about Mr. Jon Moxley. You guys know how there's a lot of blood usage in AEW, and you know how a lot of people complain that there's a lot of blood use for, for random matches that really don't matter a lot. And honestly, if you think about it, to an extent, it's a valid argument. And even in my opinion, I think AEW definitely overuses blood a little bit too much. But Jon Moxley defends the usage of blood in wrestling, and he talks about how this is a combat sport and it adds realism. Of course, Jon Moxley was in an interview with Sports Illustrated. In a quote by Jon Moxley, he states, and I quote, "I have a whole assertion on my theory about blood in modern wrestling," says Moxley. Do we have time for that? Of course, he talks about how this is a combat sport, and Moxley continued. College wrestling is a combat sport too. They have blood timeouts to patch it up. The lowest prelim bout of a UFC card or a boxing card, somebody might have a little blood on their eyebrow or blood coming out of their nose, but they're not selling a blood sport. It's not. Tune in for the blood. Tune in for the gore. It's part of the aesthetic, and it adds realism. And honestly, he continues on, and he states, some people say, this is just a random match. Why is there blood? I heard the last week versus Tomohiro Ishii. He's one of the greatest of all time. I'm not going to let that moment slip by. It's going foot to the footing, gas pedal. How can it not? I hear that I have a good match without blood. Okay, then you made my argument for me. I'll do it every time. So that was the quote by Jon Moxley. Honestly, when it comes to blood usage in wrestling, Moxley definitely does have a point. Of course, he talks about how it is a combat sport, and whether you would like to believe it or not, pro wrestling, at the end of the day, even though it's a predetermined outcome, I do prefer it as a sport because there's a lot of athleticism involved. This is my take on Jon Moxley and his usage of blood. And this is not really just for Jon Moxley, it's for AEW as a whole. We all know AEW definitely uses a lot of blood in their matches. My best take on it is I like the idea of the fact that they use blood. And of course, when it comes to pro wrestling, wrestlers blade, to really get that blood pumping out. That was the way, it was used back in the day. But WWE doesn't really use blood a lot. They only use it for like special moments, but very rarely, not all the time. AEW uses blood all the fucking time. And it got to the point where a lot of people started to become concerned, not only for just Jon Moxley, but for like the wrestlers as a whole that are using blood. I think it's great for you to use blood. I love blood in wrestling, and I'm not going to knock the style of like the deathmatch style of wrestling or other different styles that use blood, primarily the deathmatch style, because I have gone to deathmatch wrestling events. I've gone to two in particular GCW events in Atlantic City. And, of course, they love doing their fucking death matches and shit. They are fun to watch live. It's a fucking crazy atmosphere, and that's why I love going to those events. But when it comes to the deathmatch style itself, if I was a wrestler, honestly, I would not want to do that style because I don't know how you fucking survive doing the deathmatch style. But that is just my opinion. Watching it, I could understand why people can get turned off by it. And I'm not going to knock those people down. Also, when it comes to the usage, primarily in AEW, I do believe that they tend to overutilize the usage of blood a little bit. I can remember there was I believe it was a tornado tag team match a couple of weeks ago on Dynamite, and it was before Forbidden Door. It was a couple weeks before Forbidden Door, I believe. And there was a match between Jungle Hook, yes, Jungle Boy and Hook, who are complete opposites now. Hook is a babyface, and Jungle Boy is a heel, but whatever. It was a match. It was a tornado tag between Jungle Hook and Preston Vance Angelistico. Now, to an extent, a tornado tag team match, of course, there's going to be blood involved. But if you really think about it, for me watching the show, out of all the things that were going on Dynamite on that particular night, I did not really care as much for Preston Vance Angelistico taking on Jungle Boy in a tornado tag team match. I didn't really care at all. And during the match, you had fucking Preston Vance like literally bleed all over. Like he was bleeding from his like head all the way to his chest. And I'm like, bro, this is a random ass match that I do not give a single flying fuck about. And here we have Preston Vance of all people. No knock on Preston Vance. But of all people, Preston Vance is bleeding like crazy. He's bleeding like crazy. And, we just get like blood almost every week. I can remember last year where Jon Moxley was, I believe, the interim champion at the time, last summer, when he was carrying AEW on his back. Jon Moxley was like literally wrestling almost every week, I believe, defending the interim title. And Jon Moxley was like bleeding almost every week, and it started to become a running joke on the internet. So honestly, I like the usage of blood, but I do believe AEW should really tone that shit down at the end of the day. Really tone it down, because if you really think about it, yeah, blood adds realism, and it does add realism to the matches, but at the same time, to some people watching the show, it can turn people off. Blood is not for everybody in pro wrestling at the end of the day. Also, if you really think about it, another issue that AEW has is not only just the usage of blood, which to me is fine, but I do think they overuse it a little bit, is their production. There are times where I don't even see it when I'm watching live on television, but a lot of other people all over social media catch this type of stuff, and there'd be shots of Jon Moxley literally blading like in front of a live audience on television. Like there's the production catches this shit, and they really need to do a better job at really hiding the fact that Jon Moxley is blading. So honestly, when it comes to the usage of blood, I understand it. I would understand Jon Moxley's perspective, but to me as a viewer, even though I like the usage of blood and I do believe blood, adds realism to matches, I do think AEW should tone it down a little bit, tone it down a little bit, because at some point, when is enough when it comes to the usage of blood? When WWE uses blood, it's for any particular reason. They use it for like storyline purposes. Not to say AEW doesn't do it for storyline purposes, but AEW, if you're using blood almost every week, then that's where the problem lies, and a lot of people tend to get turned off by that. That is just my opinion. I don't want to knock on blood or the style of wrestling. Jon Moxley wants to wrestle the way he does. Let him wrestle the way he wants to do, because at the end of the day, he's just enjoying his life and he's enjoying his career right now. So, yeah, that's my take on blood and Jon Moxley and his take on blood. In our next topic, we are going to be talking about the All-In ticket sales. Of course, All-In is going to be taking place at Wembley Stadium. And, bro, the tickets are selling very well for this show. According to WrestleTix on Twitter, of course, the current setup for the show, since Wembley Stadium is a big-ass venue, the current setup for the show is 87,825. The amount of tickets that are distributed for the show is roughly around 74,888, and it most likely had gone up, of course, a little bit higher, and I believe it surpassed the 75,000 mark. Honestly, this is nothing but a huge success for AEW at the end of the day. And honestly, nobody should be knocking at the fact that AEW in the UK is doing these kinds of numbers. Now, it's also safe to assume that AEW has been struggling in their ticket sales right here in the US, primarily also in Canada as well. They have this whole Canadian tour going on, and over in Canada, they were also struggling in their ticket sales, but also here in the States, they're struggling with their ticket sales as well. Very rarely would they get a sellout nowadays. 2 years ago, they would sell out every fucking place. Now, the momentum has definitely dusted off, and WWE is definitely the hot ticket in town. But the fact that AEW has sold roughly over 75,000, tickets for All In goes to show you the demand that there is for a wrestling show. And if you really think about it, that is the spirit of All In. The spirit of All In is betting on yourself and taking a chance. That is the reason why. The same detractors of, All In, from 2018 are the same people that are knocking on the idea now with AEW. Overall, I think this is great for the industry. You see a lot of people on the internet just constantly bicker about how this show is going to be a failure. And I look at these people and I'm like, bro, do you have a fucking life? We have a number 2 company. AEW is number 2. I don't give a shit what anybody says. AEW is number 2. Nobody should debate the idea that AEW is number 1, because they are not, and they never will be. WWE has, the biggest market share in the entire industry, and they are the number 1 promotion in the world. If you honestly deny that, clearly something is wrong with you. But we have a number 2 that is healthy. When was the last time a major promotion here in the United States, and I'm choosing my words wisely because I know some people are going to be saying New Japan with the Tokyo Dome, all that stuff, but I'm talking about only here in the United States, went to a major venue like a stadium, either here or overseas. Not one that I can think of. The last time a major promotion went to a, venue almost the size of Wembley Stadium was WCW when they went to the Georgia Dome for those Nitros back in 98 and 99. Nitro 97 and 98 would sell out fucking everywhere. And roughly, I believe in the Georgia Dome for that July 98 episode of Nitro where Goldberg beat Hollywood Hogan for the title was roughly around 30-something thousand seats. So that was a big stadium show for WCW at the time. TNA was the number 2 promotion in the 2000s and, of course, in the early to mid 2010s until, all the bullshit started to go on, with the cancellation from Impact on Spike TV, all that crazy stuff. Impact was the number 2 promotion here in the States for that time before AEW even existed. But TNA could never, in the States, sell as much tickets as AEW did in Wembley Stadium. I remember TNA went to I believe it was the Alamo Dome for Lockdown. I think it was 2013, where they had the cage match between Bully Ray and Jeff Hardy, and it was the night where Bully Ray revealed himself as the president, a.k.a. the leader of the Aces and Eights. And if you look at the old ticket chart, or the stadium chart, or the seating chart, I should say, for Alamo Dome for that particular show, the Alamo Dome is this big, and only the corner was the seats that were available for the Alamo Dome. So really, TNA ran only a small section of the Alamo Dome, which is fucking embarrassing if you really think about it. No other number two after WCW could sell out this many tickets either here in the States or overseas. And the fact that AEW is able to do that goes to show you that they are a healthy number two promotion. Also, I wanted to point out a tweet by Brad Shepard. And usually I don't want to say call out people because I hate that fucking term, but I just wanted to mention this tweet because I thought it was fucking stupid. He tweeted this out. AEW All In is going to generate millions in revenue for AEW. It's going to be good for them. The fans in attendance will overwhelmingly enjoy the show. I don't think anybody is debating that. And, he's right with that statement, but this statement right here was the stupidest fucking shit I've heard in my life. With all due respect, this was the dumbest fucking statement I've heard. But please elaborate with specifics as to how this is great for the industry. Spoiler alert, it's not. How is this not great for the industry? How is this not great for the industry? This everything that I explained before I talked about or even stated this tweet clearly shows why this is great for the industry. Because AEW is a healthy number two promotion that is going to a large venue like Wembley Stadium. Do you honestly think it's a coincidence that WWE brought out John Cena to, propose, because they didn't announce, they proposed the idea of WrestleMania being a part of London in the UK? You don't think WWE is looking at the demand and the ticket sales for All In? For a fact they would love to go to Wembley Stadium, and they would love to, sell out 2 straight nights inside Wembley Stadium. WWE would love to do that. But the only way we're going to be getting a WrestleMania in London is if London, pays a large amount of money and is the leading bidder for WrestleMania, because WrestleMania is now a show that is being bid. It's as big of enough show that the show is now being bid, But would I love a WrestleMania in London? Yeah, I would. But are we going to get it, are we going to get it soon? I do not think so. But it all depends whether or not London will bid enough money for that particular WrestleMania. But WWE is clearly looking at the ticket sales for All In. Clearly looking at the ticket sales for All In. Because, of course, they're not going to choose to run Wembley Stadium. I believe Wembley Stadium, or London, I should say, did try to bid for Clash at the Castle last year, but then, of course, Cardiff beat him. But still, international shows are the norm, nowadays. WWE, they're doing monster business internationally. Their pay-per-view formula, the way that WWE does their pay-per-view formula now is phenomenal, because they either have, shows here in the States, but the majority of their pay-per-views are taking place in international markets, which I absolutely love. But again, AEW All In is definitely good for the industry because, again, AEW is a healthy number two promotion. Not one promotion could literally, before AEW even existed, could go to a venue like Wembley Stadium, besides WWE, and just sell that many tickets the way that AEW has sold those amount of tickets. So all the bickering on the internet are clearly by people that want this show to fail. And when AEW All In happens, people are going to look real fucking silent. And I'm not saying that because I'm an AEW fanboy. I'm just saying that because it's the fucking truth. It is clearly the fucking truth. The fact that we have 2 promotions that are able to go to stadiums for their major shows goes to show you how healthy the wrestling business is. I don't want to say we're going to be headed towards a boom period, because I think that's very fucking ludicrous to say. We're nowhere near a boom period. But I think the wrestling business is more healthy now than it was back in 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015. It is more healthy now than it ever was. We have a number 2 promotion that is on the Turner networks on both TNT and TBS. That alone is great for the industry because it offers more jobs for not only wrestlers, but, personnel, production personnel, all those other people. It offers more jobs for everybody. And if AEW is healthy, the wrestling business thrives because it offers more options for any type of wrestler. Any wrestler would love to go to WWE, and trust me, WWE is the be-all, end-all for everything. But, again, some people just are not successful in WWE, or some people just do not want to go to WWE and want to either wrestle in Japan or in AEW. The fact that AEW is doing a show in London at Wembley Stadium is a huge positive for the company, and it's definitely beneficial for the industry. Don't listen to people like Brad Shepard, who's a fucking idiot, with all due respect, and don't listen to a lot of other people that are constantly just bickering on the idea of this show because, again, they just look fucking stupid, and they clearly want this show to fail at the end of the day. This is nothing but a success. All right. Next off, we're going to be talking about AEW Collision. The ratings came out for the 3rd week of Collision, and it's safe to say that the ratings are not good for Collision. So, of course, we're going to be talking about Collision. Let me actually pull up the ratings report right here. I'm actually reading this from PW Torch's website. But the Collision ratings are out. Last Saturday's episode of AEW Collision, which was the 3rd week, not yesterday's episode, the week prior, that episode of AEW Collision drew 452,000 viewers, which is down from 595 the prior week. And, of course, the premiere episode, which featured the return of CM Punk, which had 816,000. Honestly, that is not a good number. Honestly, it just isn't a good number in my opinion. I expected the show to do roughly around maybe 700, 800,000 viewers weekly. But I talked about this when, Collision was first, even rumored, not even announced, when the show was rumored about being on a Saturday night. Saturday night is going to be a tough fucking night for AEW. It's going to be an uphill battle that I don't know that they could honestly win because you have college football starting up. You're going to be going head-to-head with WWE pay-per-views, and wrestling fans are going to prioritize the WWE pay-per-view over AEW Collision. It's just the nature of the business at the end of the day. Now, when it comes to a Saturday night, we do not know what Warner Brothers Discovery thinks of these ratings. I personally believe they definitely expected this, and it shows in this Fightful Select report. They talked about what Warner Brothers Discovery would consider a success for AEW Collision. AEW Collision, this of course is according to Fightful Select. AEW Collision debuted on the night that is largely uncharted territory for a weekly primetime Saturday night show on this television landscape. AEW Dynamite has generally been 830 or between the 830,000 to 950,000 viewers on Wednesdays in prime time, while AEW Rampage has been all over the map because of the sporadic viewing times. Fightful has inquired within both AEW and sources at Warner Brothers Discovery prior to the launch of the show as to what they would consider a success for a Saturday night. AEW didn't respond to Fightful Select's inquiries, but sources within Warner Brothers Discovery told Fightful that they were much more interested in the rankings than they were a particular number. AEW Dynamite has steadily ranked highly for the night, and Warner Brothers Discovery sources say that they expect the same out of AEW Collision. They also noted that they are well aware that the fall months will face stiff competition with college football. Those sources said that they largely considered a top 5 ranking as a success. Collision's performance looks to be integral towards AEW landing a new media rights deal, which we're told would be a huge addition financially for the company, and talks have been ongoing between each side. So, coming from Warner Brothers Discovery, it clearly shows that they care about the ranking of the show rather than the actual number. Now, I think they should prioritize the number. If that number goes below, maybe 300K and goes down to like 200K, which I think is fucking impossible. But, I feel like when it comes to 400K, I think that's not really the best. I think it's a little concerning in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. But if Warner Brothers Discovery is prioritizing the ranking and only care about the ranking of the show, that's nothing but positive per se for Collision, but we're just going to have to wait and see as these next couple of weeks go by. when it comes to the ratings for the show, a lot of people tend to call it Rampage just by comparing it to the ratings, which if you're talking about it from a ratings perspective, yeah, it's kind of pathetic. But if you're talking about it from a show perspective, I think Collision is phenomenal. If anything, Collision is even better than Dynamite because the show flows well. There's a different presentation. You get a sense that you're watching a different show, and you get a sense that you're not necessarily watching an AEW show, even if it is an AEW show. And that is exactly what I like about Collision. It's more, I don't want to say grounded, but it's more grounded and more basic and more easier to watch. Because if you watch Dynamite, and don't get me wrong, I think Dynamite is great, and I think variety in wrestling, especially in one company, is great. It's great to have different options and different varieties. But my biggest problem with Dynamite is the fact that even though Dynamite is a 2-hour show, it feels like the show is a little bit rushed. You'd have a big moment that happened on Dynamite, and then immediately they'd go to like the next segment, whether it's a backstage interview that doesn't really mean much or a 20-second video package at the end of the day. That's what AEW Dynamite would do. Collision is more grounded, and it really lets, big moments that happen really let breathe, and they just let those moments happen. So overall, I think Collision is great. I thought last night's show was phenomenal. Hopefully the ratings go up for the show, but for me, when it comes to the stuff that you watch right here on the WrestleHavoc podcast, I don't judge the show from the ratings. I judge the show whether if it's good or not creatively. It's great to see a show succeed. Like, look at the SmackDown ratings. SmackDown is doing, I don't want to say monster numbers, but if you compare it to the numbers that they were doing, a couple of years ago on Fox, the Bloodline storyline is clearly doing well, in terms of viewership because people are invested. But when it comes to Collision, I genuinely believe I definitely enjoy Collision as a show, and I even enjoy it way more than AEW Dynamite. Not to say that I do not enjoy Dynamite, because I love Dynamite. I think Dynamite is great, but Collision, it's just on a different level, and it's easier for me to watch, and it's just more fun for me to watch. That's just my opinion. But we're going to have to wait and see what the numbers are for, AEW Collision, and we're going to see where the future holds for I don't want to say what the future holds for this show, but we're just going to have to wait and see where the show will lie, in the next couple of months and see what will happen. Of course, it's very important when it comes to the TV deal with AEW. Of course, I believe this is I don't want to say their final year, but I believe they have a 1-year option on the current contract that they have with Warner Brothers Discovery. So what's interesting about that is, of course, they are negotiating right now with Warner Brothers Discovery to see what they can do with AEW for the future, and, of course, a new contract with Warner Brothers Discovery. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. What about a streaming deal with AEW? We still do not know where All In is going to be airing because All In is not an actual pay-per-view. All In is a special event, and most likely, I believe we're going to be getting All In on Max, but we're going to have to wait and see. But nonetheless, I think Collision is a great show. The ratings, fortunately, do not say otherwise, but we're going to have to wait and see what this week's ratings for this week's show tail and, lie on. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on AEW Collision. CM Punk is in the news. Yes, CM Punk is in the news. And it was reported that AEW, or I should say not AEW, CM Punk was pitched for the Blood and Guts match. According to Fightful Select, the Blood and Guts match ended up getting unfortunately hampered at AEW/New Japan Pro Wrestling's Forbidden Door. Bryan Danielson, of course, was supposed to be a part of the show, but he unfortunately broke his arm at the show and hasn't been backstage since, effectively removing him from the Blackpool Combat Club versus the Elite match at Blood and Guts. However, CM Punk offered to get involved in the match, Fightful Select has been told. Fightful Select sources confirmed with Voices of Wrestling's, of course, Voices of Wrestling were the ones that kind of started the news of Punk being involved in the match. They confirmed Voices of Wrestling's report that Punk pitched himself as the 5th member of the Blackpool Combat Club's team. Whether seriously or not, or whether he actually expected the offer to be accepted, isn't known. He has expressed his desire to work with the Elite in the past, but said that he had been told it wasn't happening. And one source stated, and I quote, "Neither team would want him. When we asked about the issues with Blackpool Combat Club's Jon Moxley, we're told that Moxley wasn't opposed to the idea. However, as of 2 tweaks before the show, the partners were already determined." So that last line there, after 2 tweaks before the show, the partners were already determined. It looks like they have their partners set in stone, unfortunately, for the match. Who the Blackpool Combat Club's member is going to be for Blood and Guts, we have no idea. We clearly know who the mystery partner is going to be on the Elite side. It's definitely going to be Kota Ibushi, and we actually have a report by Fightful Select talking about Kota Ibushi later on that we are going to be discussing. But what are my thoughts on the idea of CM Punk being a part of the Blood and Guts match? If, eventually if they can come to an agreement on CM Punk being a part of the match, I think it's a positive. Yes, it's clearly shown that CM Punk does, in a way, have heat with Jon Moxley about all the fiasco that went down in the build-up to their all-out match last year, which I thought was very stupid if you really think about it. Doing the Rocky idea, let's be honest, the Rocky idea last year was just dumb, very dumb. But CM Punk being a part of the Blood and Guts match and possibly setting up, a program with the Elite, it's honestly, it makes total sense. It really does make sense. But from what it looks like, after Blood and Guts, the Elite is going to shift towards the Dark Order. And from what it looks like at the end of Collision, CM Punk is going to be, in a program with Samoa Joe because of what happened at the end of that match or after that match. And it looks like Samoa Joe is going to be costing Ricky Starks the match. So it looks like we're not going to be getting the program with the Elite, but hopefully, and honestly, if you really think about it creatively, in a way, it kind of doesn't make sense. Punk, going, partnering with the Blackpool Combat Club, then all of a sudden, clearly the Blackpool Combat Club would get the win if Punk was involved. And honestly, if Punk was involved, there'd be a conflict of who should win and who should lose. I think that'd be the case. But it's interesting. I would love for CM Punk to be a part of this match. Do I think it's going to be happening? No, I don't. But I would love for it to happen, and honestly, I just want all sides to work together to make really shit, just make shit happen. Make shit happen, make money, and everybody is happy at the end of the day. Because, again, I hate the idea of the Elite and CM Punk just being split, from one another. And every time when there's a pay-per-view, both are on opposite sides of the arena. It's fucking dumb, and it's petty, and it's dumb, and it's childish. I just don't like the idea of both of them being split up for all of the bullshit that was going on. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully, CM Punk maybe is the mystery partner, but I doubt it's going to be the mystery partner, especially by that last line from that Fightful Select report. But honestly, it's an interesting idea. And if CM Punk would be involved in the match, then it changes the landscape of Blood and Guts. It really does change the landscape. And if CM Punk is involved, a lot of people are going to be talking about it. But as the report says, CM Punk was pitched to be a part of the match. So he's not official, and he's not going to be a part of the match, especially by that last line, because they have their two tag team members officially, set and determined. So yeah, those are that's my take on CM Punk and the Blood and Guts match. All right, after that, we're going to be talking about Triple H, Nikon, and Vince McMahon's rumored meeting. We all know Vince McMahon, he's definitely kind of chopping at a way of, WWE creative and the creative process. Is he fully in charge of creative? No. Triple H, of course, is still at the helm, but there's been a lot of reports on Vince McMahon making a lot of late changes in terms of the shows. Fightful Select has reported that there were rumors recently that Triple H and Nick Khan were planning a creative intervention meeting with Vince McMahon. McMahon is currently backstage in his office at SmackDown at Madison Square Garden. This was, of course, on Friday, and has been making heavy changes to recent WWE shows. Most of the changes had been made remotely and have featured some advertised matches completely pulled from the show. The rumor was that Triple H and Nick Khan were planning to ask McMahon to step back from making late and heavy changes. The initial rumor was that the meeting was to take place at the June 26th episode of Raw, which we've confirmed did not happen. There were long-term sources that heard the possibility of a meeting, but also said that they'd never heard of it actually taking place. Talent that we spoke to said that usually that type of thing would happen in the middle of a week instead of directly ahead of Raw unless it was a talent meeting. Based on what we've heard so far, no such meeting has occurred or is planned. Vince McMahon is in a position where such a meeting could only be a recommendation. Khan and Triple H cannot force him out. And when we asked a WWE official about the rumors, they claimed that there was no truth to it whatsoever and dismissed it as silly. It's worth noting that for quite a while, WWE higher-ups previously dismissed the idea of Vince McMahon returning to creative for quite some time. So Fightful Select even confirmed it. That meeting did not happen. Do I think Vince McMahon has been making changes to the show? Yes, but it's still relatively a Triple H show. And yes, it's true, Nick Khan and Triple H cannot force Vince McMahon out because at the end of the day, this is still Vince McMahon's company, and the transaction from WWE to Endeavor hasn't fully, finished yet. And when that transaction is fully set in stone, we're going to have to wait and see what happens with the creative process. And I talked about this when the sale was first announced. There is a reason as to why Vince McMahon sold the company to Endeavor, and the process of, UFC and WWE merging will be happening later this year. There's a reason why the company was going to get sold to Endeavor, and that is because Vince McMahon is still, the majority shareholder of the company, and he is friends with Ariel Manoa, that's his name, and he's been I don't know how long he's been friends with him, for 20 years. So he's been friends with him, and also Vince McMahon is not stupid. He's been planning this shit for a while now, and unfortunately, he's not going to leave anytime soon. Unless something drastically fucked up comes out about Vince McMahon, he will not be forced out. We thought it happened last year, but Vince McMahon unfortunately came back and forced his way back into the company. But Vince McMahon leaving WWE creative, or not creative, or, Vince McMahon retiring from WWE, forget about it. That shit was a fucking lie from July, unfortunately. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But when it comes to Vince McMahon, this man is staying, which unfortunately sucks, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the future. All right. In our next report, we're going to be talking about Kota Ibushi. Yes, Kota Ibushi. And it looks like he's going to be on his way for AEW. According, once again, by Fightful Select, AEW is likely getting a huge name at least for a little while. Fightful has confirmed that conversations have taken place between international star Kota Ibushi and All Elite Wrestling. Most of the talent we spoke to this week are in the belief that he would be joining the company in some capacity, specifically for the upcoming Blood and Guts show. AEW hasn't made an official announcement and has not been nearly as public of late. Ibushi's management has reduced media obligations, citing that his schedule is picking up in the near future, with the source close to Ibushi in Japan saying he's planning to work the upcoming AEW show. Ibushi wrestled for GCW during WrestleMania week, but otherwise, he has been out of action since October of 2021 for a variety of reasons. There was some talent that worked both New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW who wondered in the past if Ibushi being involved with AEW would strain the relationship with New Japan. Ibushi and New Japan had a series of issues that led to his departure. However, Ibushi claimed that those have since been resolved and a contract offer from New Japan has been made. I think it's pretty much clear as day that Kota Ibushi is on his way towards AEW. It's pretty obvious that he's going to be going into AEW. I do not think he's going to be going to WWE whatsoever, because if you really think about it, if he goes to WWE, what is there for Kota Ibushi to do for WWE? People need to realize Ibushi is one of the best in-ring performers you could ever see, especially now, and he fits so well with the style that AEW wrestles in. AEW, I hate saying this, but they wrestle that indie style. They wrestle, they use many different styles. They utilize Lucha Libre, strong style, the UK style. They basically blend all these different styles of wrestling all into one promotion, and that is basically the sheer definition I can give you for AEW. Kota Ibushi fits perfectly there. Not only that, Kenny Omega is an EVP of AEW, and of course he's best friends with Kenny Omega. So reuniting the Golden Lovers, even though it's not officially announced, we all know it for a fact. It's literally the worst kept secret in all of wrestling. Kind of similar to, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield showing up at Spider-Man No Way Home. It's basically on the vein of that. Kota Ibushi will be on his way towards AEW, and he will be teaming up with the Elite as part of the Blood and Guts match against the Blackpool Combat Club. So it's obvious that Kota Ibushi's coming in, but of course what's interesting is who is the Blackpool Combat Club's member going to be. Of course, CM Punk was pitching. We already talked about that, but again, it is a mystery that is still, something that we just do not know about regarding the BCC side. But when it comes to the Elite side, Kota Ibushi is definitely on his way towards All Elite Wrestling. All right, after that, we are going to be talking about Drew McIntyre. Yes, Drew McIntyre, we got an update on his contract status. Of course, Drew McIntyre made his return to WWE this past Saturday at Money in the Bank in London at the O2 Arena, and it looks like he's going to be targeting Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. According to Fightful Select, Drew McIntyre is back and is set for a big Intercontinental title program with Gunther picking up where he left off after WrestleMania. At the Money in the Bank post-show press conference, Triple H dismissed reports of creative issues between McIntyre and WWE. WWE sources and sources close to McIntyre all confirmed that his deal was up in early 2024. Triple H says that he hopes that McIntyre was there for the rest of his career, while Fightful never reported creative issues between McIntyre and WWE. Fightful can confirm that ensuring good creative was something important to McIntyre. While Drew was off television and social media during that period, he was in continuous contract talks with Triple H and WWE, though he wasn't informed of when or where he'd be drafted to. Sources close to McIntyre say that he has not signed a new contract as of yet. Triple H also confirmed a Fightful Select report that Drew McIntyre had inquiries that mounted up and needed to get a couple things fixed. He's been dealing with injuries for quite some time, and including gutting out of a highly acclaimed match at WrestleMania with Sheamus and Gunther. The return was kept very quiet, and both sides got suspiciously quiet in the weeks leading up to it. McIntyre was not brought up to the presser and was spending time with his loved ones while he had the chance. So yeah, the biggest takeaway that I can give you from this Fightful report is the fact that Drew McIntyre has not yet to sign a new WWE contract. That is something to keep note of. But where do I think Drew McIntyre will end up when his contract is up? Honestly, I have no idea. I know immediately a lot of people are throwing, the All Elite graphic, a made-up All Elite graphic with Drew Galloway on there. Look, at the end of the day, Drew McIntyre wants to do what Drew McIntyre wants to do. If he wants to stay with WWE, let him stay with WWE. AEW, everybody tends to throw the All Elite graphic at everybody. Going to AEW doesn't guarantee you success at the end of the day. People need to understand that. It'd be fucking cool if a guy like Drew McIntyre came into AEW, but AEW doesn't guarantee you success. If you go to AEW from the WWE, you're just not guaranteed, the amount of success that either you have in WWE or had in WWE or, the amount of success that you want in AEW. Look, it doesn't guarantee you success. Look at Keith Lee right now. Is AEW doing a lot with Keith Lee right now? No, they're not. So really, it all depends on what AEW, if they wanted to bring in a guy like Drew Galloway, what would Drew McIntyre or what would they do with Drew McIntyre if he was brought into AEW? And it clearly shows in this Fightful Select report that the creative is definitely an important part of Drew McIntyre. It's important for the direction. It's important to Drew McIntyre of the direction of his own career and his path. So that's one note that we really need to take into consideration. But what do I believe? What do I believe will happen? I genuinely believe at the end of the day, I think he will stay with the WWE. I think he will stay with the WWE. Yeah, he hasn't really been doing a lot now, but there's a lot of guys in the WWE right now, especially a lot of the top guys that you just consider lifers within the WWE. A guy like Edge is definitely considered a lifer, even though AEW did try to sign him before, Edge officially came out of retirement and he returned at the Royal Rumble back in 2020. It's a very true story. AEW did try to sign him. But also, if you really think about it, some guys are lifers like Seth Rollins. I think, when his contract is up, he's going to be a WWE lifer. There are some guys that are just WWE lifers, and there's some guys that are just not and love branching out. Could there be a possibility of Drew McIntyre going to AEW? Yeah, but at the end of the day, I do think he will be staying with WWE, and I do believe that he will sign a new contract, but it all depends on what Drew McIntyre wants to do at the end of the day. And what's actually very funny is that, I'm crediting this to AEW, even though this is a WWE photo, so I forgot to get that fixed. I'm such a dumbass for that, but it is what it is. If you guys are watching this on video, clearly you guys are going to point that out right there. But those are my takes on Drew McIntyre and his contract status. We got the rumored card for SummerSlam 2023. The rumored card for SummerSlam, and this is just the rumored card, but from what it looks like that this card is showing, it looks like these are the matches that we are going to be getting. Ronda Rousey versus Shayna Baszler. Gunther versus Drew McIntyre for the Intercontinental Championship. Asuka versus Charlotte versus Bianca Belair for the Women's Championship. Trish Stratus versus Becky Lynch. Cody Rhodes versus Brock Lesnar. And Roman Reigns versus Jey Uso for the Undisputed title. That is the rumored card. It's not official. That is the rumored card for this year's SummerSlam. And honestly, if you really think about it, it's not the best card. But this card, if you look at it, it does make sense creatively because all of these were the programs that are going into SummerSlam, and these are all the programs that are going in right now. Like, of course, Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler are currently in a feud, and it looks like Ronda Rousey is going to be on her way out of WWE, and they're going to write Ronda Rousey off. Gunther and Drew McIntyre, of course, they teased that match. Asuka, Charlotte Flair, Bianca Belair, they've been, going at it on WWE television. Trish Stratus and Becky Lynch as well. Cody Rhodes and Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar made his return, and Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. You know what's going on WWE television. Even though it's not the best card, it makes sense creatively because there are all the stuff that is going on in WWE television right now. So that is the rumored SummerSlam card. Speaking of pay-per-views, WWE, of course, they got pay-per-views announced. They actually announced Survivor Series, and it's going to be interesting to see where Survivor Series is going to be going. It's going to be in Chicago. But I'm going to be listing the amount of pay-per-views that WWE is going to be having. On Saturday, September 2nd, WWE is going to be hosting Payback in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. On Saturday, October 7th, we're going to be having WWE Fastlane in Indianapolis, Indiana. And on Saturday, 25th, we're going to be having WWE Survivor Series in Chicago, Illinois. What's interesting is that when WWE announced Survivor Series, the interesting note that I can give you guys is that they just announced it as Survivor Series. They did not announce it as Survivor Series War Games. I think I can speak for everybody. War Games should be, an integral part of Survivor Series. The fact that they didn't announce Survivor Series with War Games this year is a little concerning to me because, again, WWE did War Games last year, and it was a huge success, and it was phenomenal. We had Team Sheamus versus Team Bloodline in War Games. I absolutely loved that match. Of course, it escalated the story with Sami Zayn and the Bloodline, but it's interesting that they didn't add War Games for Survivor Series this year. Is WWE going to revert back to the traditional 5-on-5 tag team match for Survivor Series? Are they going to revert back to the dumbass Raw versus SmackDown one-on-one matches where we have a champion versus champion, wrestler versus wrestler from a different brand? The only one time a year where Raw and SmackDown go head-to-head in competition, which is such a fucking lie considering the fact that WWE doesn't even follow their own rules when it comes to the brand split. I speak for everyone. War Games should be a part of Survivor Series this year. And if War Games is not a part of Survivor Series this year, I think that is a big, big, big no-no, in my opinion, and that is a big mistake that WWE could make. War Games should be an annual thing for Survivor Series because if you really think about it, even though WWE did not create the concept, War Games, they own the concept, and also, if you think about it, War Games fits so well with the idea of Survivor Series. It just makes things so much more interesting, in my opinion. So, hopefully we get War Games this year, but that is a little bit of a concern, in my opinion, regarding that matter. And finally, we are going, this is just one small news, a small bit of news, I should say, and this is our final story. Ring of Honor, Death Before Dishonor. We have our first match announced, of course. Ring of Honor, Death Before Dishonor is going to be taking place July 21st in Trenton, New Jersey, my home state. And it's going to be taking place at the Cure Insurance Arena. And we got the main event for the show. And the main event for the show is going to be Claudio Castagnoli taking on Mark Briscoe for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Honestly, what are my thoughts on this? I think it's great. I think it's great that Mark Briscoe is going to go after the ROH World title. I haven't been watching ROH for the past couple of months, so I do not know what's going on. At this point, I only watch the pay-per-view because they're actually really good shows. But when it comes to the weekly show, I mean, the show is 2 weeks away, and I don't know, man. we haven't had a single match announced besides this match. So it's going to be very interesting to see what AEW/Ring of Honor is going to be doing for this show. But we have Claudio Castagnoli taking on Mark Briscoe. That's going to be a great match. Honestly, if you really think about it, I'm contemplating whether or not I'm going to this show. Hell, I'm even contemplating whether or not I should even cover this show. I'm probably going to watch the show, but when it comes to attending the show, tickets are selling very slow for this show. That's why I didn't get a ticket yet. For Collision is actually going to be taking place the next night. So I'm actually going to that Collision show in Newark, New Jersey. But when it comes to Trenton, I'm still contemplating whether or not I should be going to that show. But when it comes to watching the show, I will be watching it, but at the same time, I just do not know if I'm going to be covering the show because really AEW or Ring of Honor, I should say, hasn't really been doing a lot to really get me hyped for this pay-per-view. It all depends on what they do. I'll think about it whether or not I should cover the show or whether or not I should even be attending the show. But we have the first match announced, and the show is literally only 2 weeks away. So honestly, at this point, AEW really needs to start announcing matches for Death Before Dishonor at this point. But yeah, that was my final story. But that was episode 21 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. Overall, we definitely talked about a lot of topics. We talked about CM Punk and his involvement possibly, and it's not confirmed, in the Blood and Guts match. The All-In ticket sales, Jon Moxley, AEW Collision, all that stuff. We definitely talked about a lot of things going on in the realm of pro wrestling. Of course, I'm going to be back with Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw is going to be happening tomorrow. We got Dynamite on Wednesday, SmackDown on Friday, and of course AEW Collision on Saturday. So be on the lookout for all of those reviews. But in the meantime, please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications, and be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc podcast, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the freaking referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is Flamin' Ricky Gervais signing out. I'll see you guys later.